Welcome to Harlots of Spooktalk, where the creepy comes alive. Three wicked hosts grinning through the static like it's all survived. Tiffany spills the truth with a blade-sharp smile. LD shakes the wand and the whole room blackens wild. Karli drags the daylight face down through the mud. True crime, dead air, and the dirty little junk you shouldn't love. LD licks eyeballs. Karli might be a voodoo queen, and Tiffany's a paranormal investigator. So turn it up, let the basement shake. Harlots of Spooktalk, we bite back when the speakers break. Harlots of Spooktalk, say it loud, say it mean. Where the spooky claws its way right through the screen.
Viewer discretion advised. This episode contains strong language, adult themes, potentially frightening content. Listener discretion is strongly advised. All content is for entertainment purposes only. Any true crime or historic information discussed is publicly available online. I've been waiting 2 whole years to do this episode, and tonight I'm finally getting my wish. Tonight on Harlots of Spooktalk, we will take you into the disturbing story of Pazuzu Algarad, a man surrounded by occult imagery, a terrifying reputation, a home that became the center of a horrifying murder investigation. We'll explore his background, the disturbing discoveries investigators made, the murders he was accused of, the people connected to the case, and the unanswered questions left behind after his death. And yes, after 2 years of me asking the question, everyone is finally letting me have it. Don't forget, tonight's sponsor is Sadie's Soda, organic functioning beverages. Get 10% off with promo code HOST. That's HOST, HOST. The link is down below. Make sure you check them out. Now on to our episode. Enjoy.
Before we get into the schmuttas, the investigation and discovery that turned an entire case upside down, I want to start. Excuse me, I need to get my microphone. I want to start with the person behind the name, because Pazuzu wasn't actually born Pazuzu Algarad. Okay, how do you say it, Karli?
Algarad, something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So he was born John Alexander Lawson in 1978. He was born in California, but his family eventually moved to North Carolina, where he spent much of his life. And this is one of those cases where we have to be really careful about separating documented information from mythology that he grew up around, right? So because there was some absolutely wild stories about Pazuzu's childhood floating around online, some people describe him as been having like really disturbed during childhood, while others, and then others claim he was involved with the dark practices when he was very young. But the problem is, But the problem is, sorry. But the problem is that a lot of those stories aren't backed up well enough for us to present them as fact. So we're going to stick to what we actually can establish.
Which is probably a good idea, considering the internet has turned this man basically a horror movie character.
Yeah, that's a difference between saying this person committed or was accused of committing horrific crimes and turning them into some supernatural creature.
Exactly. And that's particularly important about Pazuzu because he deliberately created a very dark image around himself. As an adult, John Alexander Lawson changed his name to Pazuzu. We'll just call him Pazuzu. Okay. Pazuzu. Don't say his name 3 times. You don't know what's going to happen. And the name wasn't random, right? Like Pazuzu was the name of an ancient Mesopotamian demon. He associated with winds, storms, and diseases. So this wasn't simply a nickname someone just gave him. This was an identity that he chose himself.
Imagine getting tired of John and thinking, you know what? I'm going to become a Mesopotamian demon.
Meanwhile, I'm over here thinking John is a perfectly acceptable
Do
name.
you though? Do you though? I mean, Tiffany. Oh no, you don't get to judge.
Excuse me?
Oh, you're the one of 3 women hosting a podcast called Harlots of Spooktalk.
She has a point.
Okay, moving on.
So, as Pazuzu got older, he developed an extremely distinctive appearance. Okay, he had extensive tattoos, including facial tattoos and other body modifications. He shaved his head and cultivated an appearance that was intentionally imitating. And according to people who knew him, he wasn't simply somebody who happened to look unusual. He embraced the image. He was fascinated with death, occult themes, dark spiritual imagery. His home on Nob Hill Drive in Clemens, North Carolina, eventually became closely associated with that lifestyle. And when you hear descriptions of the house, it doesn't sound like a normal home. There was graffiti. I mean, it was a hot mess. There was occult symbols. There was animal remains. There was drug activity. Excuse my language. And the property eventually became the location where investigators would find something much worse: human remains.
Whoa.
Yeah. So as Pazuzu became an adult, he surrounded himself with people who were involved in drugs and other troubled circumstances. He developed a reputation in the local community. People knew him, people talked about him, and there was already concerns surrounding the environment around him, being investigators discovering the bodies. But again, I want to make something clear. Being involved with drugs doesn't make you someone, or doesn't make someone a murderer. Being interested in occult subjects doesn't make someone a murderer. Having tattoos and frightening does not make someone a murderer. Those things become relevant because of the larger picture investigators eventually uncovered.
And that's something true crime gets wrong all the time. People see somebody who looks scary and immediately decide, yep, definitely guilty.
Exactly. If appearances were evidence, Karli would have been arrested approximately 12 times by now.
I'm a little offended. Just a little, but
Well,
offended.
listen, Karli, she's not wrong.
Sorry.
The Nob Hill Drive property is important because this wasn't just where Pazuzu lived, it became a center of the investigation. People who visited or knew about the property described extremely poor conditions. The house was reported filthy. There was graffiti through the property. Like I said, there was occult symbols, animal remains, and there were rumors about rituals and other disturbing activities. But once again, rumors are not evidence. So what matters is what investigators eventually uncovered. And underneath the grounds surrounding the house were 2 men.
And that's where the story goes from weird to horrifying.
Exactly. Because now we're talking about actual victims. And Karli's going to tell us who they were and what investigators believed happened to them.
All right, let's talk about the crimes. The 2 victims at the center of this case was Joshua Frederick Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welsh. Both men disappeared in 2009, and their remains wouldn't be discovered for years. Think about that. 2 people disappear, the families are left without them, and meanwhile, their remains are buried on a property where people are still coming and going. Joshua Wetzler was one of the men whose remains were eventually found on this property. Investigators determined that he had been killed. Pazuzu was eventually charged with first-degree murder in connection with Wetzler's death. But here's the legal distinction we have to make. Pazuzu was charged, but he was never convicted. He died before his case went to trial. So when we're talking about his involvement, we're talking about allegations and evidence from an investigation rather than a murder conviction. The second victim was Tommy Welsh. And this part of the story involves several people. One of these people were Amber Birch, who was a Pazuzu's girlfriend. Birch was accused of being involved in Welch's death. Prosecutors alleged that she shot Welsh. She eventually pleaded. What?
No, I was just gonna
Oh,
ask, who in the heck would date him?
there was two.
Yeah.
Oh,
They were all poly.
Yep.
We got
Yeah.
to definitely
oh,
get into that.
Yeah.
okay.
She eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Schmurder. Don't come for me. So unlike Pazuzu, Birch's case actually reached legal conclusion.
And that's important. That's an important, that's, oh my gosh. And that's an important difference because people sometimes talk about this case as if Pazuzu was convicted of both schmurders. He wasn't.
Correct. And that's why we're going to keep saying accused and not charged. Well, accused and charged, but not convicted. When we're talking about Pazuzu himself. Now comes one of the most disturbing parts of the case. The victims weren't simply, and left somewhere. The remains were buried. The investigators eventually determined that bodies had been concealed on the property, and they remained there for years. Neighbors had no idea that human remains were buried nearby. People were living normal lives around this property, and while investigators believed those victims were lying underground.
And that has to be one of the most disturbing things about the case to me, like, because there's something psychologically horrifying about realizing how close something like that can be to everyday life.
Exactly. You could walk by past a house every day, see the person who lives there, maybe even say hello, and have absolutely no idea what's happening behind closed doors. Now
Wouldn't
let's
it
get
stink though? Like
not
an
if they're
odor?
buried, not if they're buried. The house stink itself by
Ugh.
decaying animals and stuff in the house. Yeah, so it would have been hard to tell. Now let's talk about Amber Birch. Amber Birch became one of the most important people in this investigation. She was Pazuzu's other girlfriend, and prosecutors alleged that she played a role in Tommy's murder as well. Birch eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She also faced charges related to concealment of the body. And her case gave investigators another connection between the victims and the Nob Hill property. Crystal Matlock. Another woman connected to the case was Crystal Nicole Matlock. She was accused of helping conceal one of the
Mhm.
victims. She then eventually pleaded guilty to accessory related charge. And that tells us something very important about this investigation. This wasn't simply investigators finding two bodies and having no idea how they got there. There were people connected to this property who eventually faced criminal charges.
And yet, the person whose name became most associated with the property never made it to trial.
Exactly, which brings us to you.
Unfortunately.
You get the fun part.
Oh, yes. The arrest and the death, everybody's favorite bedtime story. How, man. Whew. So, this is how Pazuzu. Say that 3 times.
Do
So by
not.
2000 So by 2014, investigators had enough information to begin searching the Nob Hill Drive property, and what they discovered changed everything. Investigators excavated the property and they found human remains. 2 sets. Those remains were eventually identified as Joshua and Tommy. Oh, at that moment, this wasn't speculation anymore. There were actual victims, actual remains, and an active schmurder investigation. Pazuzu was arrested in October of 2014. He was charged with first degree murder in connection with Joshua's death. Amber Birch was also arrested and charged in connections with Tommy Welsh's murder. Crystal Matlock faced charges related to the concealment of the bodies, and suddenly the bizarre reputation surrounding the Nob Hill property was no longer just local gossip. It was a major criminal investigation. So Pazuzu was held in custody while awaiting trial, and this is where things became very different from most true crime cases, because normally this is where we'd start talking about the trial, the prosecution, the defense, the evidence, witness testimonies, maybe a verdict, but that never happened. On October 28th, 2015, Pazuzu was found unresponsive in his cell at Central Prison in, is it Raleigh?
Yeah.
All right. He was 36 years old. Medical personnel attempted to save him. They couldn't. He was pronounced dead that morning. He was so this wasn't investigated as apparent suicide. And autopsy later determined that he offed himself from blood loss caused by a deep wound to a major blood vessel in his left arm. So it was ultimately ruled as a suicide. And because he, is no longer with us, there was no trial. The murder charges against him never reached a jury.
So
Mhm.
basically, the case just ended.
For him, yes, there was no trial, no verdict, no conviction, no sentence. The criminal case against him could not continue when he was gone.
And that's where the case becomes so frustrating because people want a definite ending. They want to know exactly what happened. They want somebody to stand in court and answer for it. And that just didn't happen with Pazuzu.
Exactly. And there are questions that we'll probably never have definite answers. So what exactly happened to each victim? Who did what? What was Pazuzu's precise role? What happened inside the house? And how many of the rumors surrounding him were actually true? Because we have to remember that the internet has created a huge amount of mythology around Pazuzu.
Yeah. And this is probably the part where I get to be the annoying fact checker.
You mean you're not always the annoying fact checker?
No, I'm also annoying in my spare time.
At least she's honest.
Oh my gosh. So there are stories claiming Pazuzu committed numerous murders. There are stories about ritual killings. There are stories about satanic ceremonies. There are stories about animal sacrifices. And some of these claims have been reported over and over and online. But repetition doesn't turn a rumor into evidence. The strongest documented criminal case centers around two men whose remains were found on the property: Joshua Wetzler, Tommy Welch, and the people who were charged or pleaded guilty in the connection with those deaths.
And I think that's actually scarier than adding a bunch of fake stories. But because the truth is already disturbing, we don't need to turn something and somebody into a supernatural monster. Two men were killed. Their bodies were concealed. Their families had to live years of uncertainty. And several people end up facing criminal charges. That's horrifying enough.
And Pazuzu himself died before he could ever be convicted or acquitted. That's the part that leaves the biggest hole in the story.
So, lady, final thoughts?
For me, it's a distinction between the person and the mythology. Pazuzu deliberately created the dark identity. He changed his name. He embraced the occult imagery. He surrounded himself with people in circumstances that were deeply troubled. But none of that alone proves murder. The evidence in the court records are what matter.
For me, it's the victims because sometimes true crime becomes so focused on the killer that we forget the people who actually lost their lives. Joshua Wessler and Tommy Welsh weren't characters in a horror story. They were real people. They had families, they had lives, and those lives ended violently. That's where we should stay at the center of the story.
And for me, it's the fact that we'll never get a courtroom ending for Pazuzu. He was arrested, he was charged, investigators had evidence, other people involved in the case were prosecuted, but Pazuzu died before his case could ever be presented to a jury. So we have to be honest about what we know and what we don't.
And I think that's probably the perfect place to end this. Because if you take away the demon name, the tattoos, the occult imagery, the creepy house, the internet rumors, you left with a real and very tragic story. 2 victims, a disturbing property, uncomplicated investigation, and a defendant who died before justice could be determined in a court.
And maybe that's just like the biggest lesson here. Sometimes the truth doesn't come with a neat ending. Sometimes there are questions that remain unanswered. And sometimes the person who could have answered them isn't around anymore.
Which means we don't get to fill those gaps with whatever makes the stories scarier. We stick with the evidence, we acknowledge what's alleged, we acknowledge what's proven, and we remember the victims.
Well, that just got depressing.
It's true crime. What exactly did you expect?
A Disney ending.
I mean, maybe a little.
Wrong podcast.
Very wrong podcast.
And that is our story of Pazuzu Algarad.
Stay safe.
Stay curious.
And maybe don't go digging around your backyard tonight.
Especially if your backyard is hiding something.
Tiffany.
What?
She's just trying to give everyone nightmares.
That's literally our job.
Fair enough. Good night, everybody.
Bye.